Cyclops. Now look, Cyclops was at one point the golden boy of the X-Men. He was the guy. But there have been so many times where this man has really made some questionable decisions. But in the 2012 crossover event, Avengers vs. X-Men, is where he really went full supervillain. Basically, the Cosmic Phoenix Force was coming to Earth, and thanks to Tony Stark's Phoenix Buster, when it arrived, it was split up into 5 pieces, giving our heroes a new problem in the form of the Phoenix Five. The quintet consisted of X-Men veterans including Cyclops, Emma Frost, Namor, Magik, and Colossus, who began reshaping the world according to their will until they themselves became a threat. As each member of the 5 fell, those left standing got more and more powerful, leaving only Scott and Emma Frost, who were becoming more tyrannical by the minute. To stop the 2 of them, Professor X was recruited by Magneto, but the cosmic entity had consumed Scott and even basically made him betray Emma Frost to gain even more power for himself. After a mental battle between him and Xavier, Scott used his power to actually take the life of his father figure, mentor, and dear friend, becoming the Dark Phoenix until he was defeated by Hope Summers and Scarlet Witch. Number 9. Reed Richards. In the Ultimate Universe, Reed Richards was a brilliant scientist and leader of the Fantastic Four, as he is in the 616 continuity as well. But I do have to acknowledge something: this Reed does not stay a hero for very long. In fact, he becomes one of the greatest villains in the Marvel multiverse. When Magneto unleashed the ultimatum wave on New York, Reed's son passed away, and Sue Storm rejected his marriage proposal, he started to go a little bit bonkers. He blew up his family home along with his parents, and he faked his own de-lifing. He then planned attacks on some major buildings and Peter Parker's home, which is just rude, and eventually he became one of the most sinister villains in the Ultimate Universe. The heroes found him, beat him up, Johnny Storm disfigured him, and they left him floating out in the negative zone. Reed then decided that maybe this Earth kinda sucks, so he elongated his brain, spent 1,000 years in the distant future creating genetic superhumans, and started calling himself the Maker. Reed returned to Earth and set out on a twisted quest to make the world perfect, by whatever he means by perfect. He took out all the Asgardians in an attempt to understand Thor's power and used antimatter to attack Washington. The Maker went on to do a lot of incredibly twisted stuff, fighting the heroes of his own Earth, sure, but eventually the heroes of Earth 616 as well, after the destruction of his own universe, which he recently managed to remake. Number 8. Superboy Prime. Superboy Prime was initially a normal child on an Earth known as Earth Prime. That didn't really have superheroes, or they had superheroes in the exact same way we do, in comic books and entertainment media. This young future supervillain was adopted by Jerry and Naomi Kent, who named him Clark, which was both Naomi's maiden name and the fictional comic book character Superman in their world. Well, turns out that Clark really was Kal-El, teleported to Earth Prime before the Krypton of this universe was destroyed when its sun went supernova. Discovering his Kryptonian abilities thanks to the passing of Halley's Comet while coincidentally dressed as Superman at a Halloween party, this Superboy left his Prime Earth reality shortly afterwards. As it happens, the Earth 1 Superman just happened to be passing by and asked him to join other heroes in protecting reality itself from the Anti-Monitor during the Crisis on Infinite Earths. His reward, along with Alexander Luthor Jr. of Earth 3, was a chance to escape to a heavenly pocket dimension where he doesn't age. Unfortunately though, being able to watch the post-crisis Earth that was getting darker and darker without being able to be a part of it, losing his childhood, knowing he could never grow up to be Superman, his idol of Earth 2, and feeling like the heroes of post-crisis Earth were absolutely dog water, Superboy Prime became a pretty bitter guy. He escaped with Alexander Luthor and instigated the Infinite Crisis and was extremely despicable. Number 7. Ozymandias. In the world of the Watchmen comics, one company seems to show up in almost every area of everyday life: Veidt Enterprises, a multinational conglomerate founded by billionaire industrialist and super genius Adrian Veidt, or as he is known as a superhero, Ozymandias. Adrian used his time as the superhero Ozymandias, unmasking himself and gaining a huge amount of popularity, which helped spark his massive commercial enterprise, all with the end goal of achieving world peace. Ozymandias is wildly intelligent, but because of Watchmen's realism, he doesn't often make the same stupid, ego-fueled mistakes that other villains like Lex Luthor do. Also, more often than not, the heroes kind of find themselves a little conflicted when facing him, and that's because he is genuinely trying to help everyone, only he's doing it by using his monetary resources and super intellect to secretly create a gargantuan, tentacled, one-eyed psychic monster to end the lives of millions of people, with the goal of scaring the world powers into working together to save us from an inevitable World War III. Number 6. Robot. For most of the Invincible comic book series, the super genius known as Robot had been a very helpful ally to Invincible and the world in general, and even when he flips to become the final antagonist of the comic, spoilers, he still seems to be trying to help the world. But it's always that damn freedom versus security trope, ain't it? Rudy here is a literal super genius, like I'm talking he invented a robotic cat that was super popular in Japan at the age of 3. Robot had an overarching plan that he was slowly working towards. All of his actions were in service of his ultimate goal. He got himself a new cloned body, he got together with Monster Girl, went off-world with her to overthrow an empire and began ruling it, and eventually he took over the Earth using his robotic drones, using them to do multiple different tasks at the same time, like talking to the Viltrumites, fighting the Earth's superheroes, and meeting with the President, all for the greater good of the Earth and the human species. But he's still taking away people's free will, which is not something we really condone here. Number 5. Beast. After the mutant nation of Krakoa was founded with its various different organizations and groups, the former X-Man Hank McCoy, or Beast, was put in charge of the intelligence wing of X-Force, which was the mutant nation's equivalent to something like the CIA. Meaning, Beast is now one of the shadiest damn mutants you ever did see, and one of the most prominent examples of just how shady he is comes in his response to an attack from the Republic of Terra Verde. Beast modifies the telefloronic biotech of the country of Terra Verde to take complete control of it and its people. From there, he used them to seed telefloronic listening devices in embassies and basically used the state as a puppet for intel gathering. Hank transformed the nation into a literal puppet state and robbed its people of their free will. But his dastardly deeds have not stopped there. Other than completely robbing a nation of their free will, he also opened a space station prison, interrupted one of Wolverine's resurrections to attach an obedience collar to send him on clandestine operations, he got Wolverine taken out, cloned Wolverine, and tried to turn him into a feral animal. He also blew up a UN submarine, all of which was kept secret from the rest of X-Force. Beast has gone full rogue, basically. Number 4. Captain America. To call the betrayal within the Secret Empire storyline controversial would be a bit of an understatement. The reveal of Captain America as a longtime Hydra agent completely took readers by surprise and even a bit of anger. His vast history of always being the one to do the right thing suddenly meant very little. It even caused Marvel to be like, hold up, we were just kidding, he was manipulated by a cosmic cube, don't worry, it's all good, it's just a joke. So basically, what happened is that Steve Rogers revealed himself as a Hydra defector. He allied himself with a new Madam Hydra, took advantage of a global catastrophe to seize control of the world's governments, and helped Hydra make its move. Hydra, who had seriously infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D., began assuming control of key locations and executing any who stood in his way, including Cap personally taking out Rick Jones, a shot that left fans and characters alike reeling and pretty shocked. It was not a great time, but it did lead to the awesome Hydra had infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. thing in the MCU's Winter Soldier movie, so not a complete loss. Number 3. Plutonian. Mark Waid's Irredeemable was a superhero equivalent of Breaking Bad, the story of a good man who turned evil. In this case, the man was Dan Hardigan, a superhero similar to Superman going by the name Plutonian. Now, unlike Superman, he came from a series of broken foster homes. As an adult, Plutonian confided his secret identity to his girlfriend, but she didn't react anything like anyone else would do. She was outraged that he'd tricked her and told the whole world who he really was in retaliation to that. Things went pretty downhill from there. Dan had an affair with one of his fellow superheroes who also happened to be married. Later, he was partially responsible for an accident involving an alien virus that took out hundreds of people. He compounded the problem though by trying to keep his part of the tragedy a secret, which his sidekick soon discovered. Once he was confronted with the truth though, Plutonian snapped, and he lobotomized his protege. He then destroyed Sky City, his version of Metropolis, and home to some 3.5 million people. Most of this, though, wasn't revealed until later on in Irredeemable's run, with the bulk of its issues dedicated to his former friends and allies both attempting to stop him from going crazy and trying to find out why he even went that way in the first place. Number 2. Jean Grey. While Jean Grey coming back after the Dark Phoenix saga was one of the greatest X-Men moments of all time, it was still just a tiny little bit convoluted. Basically, it all kicks off when out in space, the X-Men were bombarded with cosmic radiation. While the other members of the team were incapacitated, Jean Grey towed the line between life and death but managed to return alive by making a sort of pact with the Phoenix Force. She was now much stronger and was reborn as the Phoenix. This led to the Phoenix Saga, where by the end of it, Jean as the Phoenix basically saved the entire multiverse. Unfortunately though, it also eventually led to the Dark Phoenix Saga, which told the story of the fall of Jean Grey to Dark Phoenix thanks to the manipulation of the Hellfire Club, which inadvertently subjected the Phoenix Force to emotional concepts that it had just never experienced before. Jean basically went out and destroyed an entire solar system in her rage at being manipulated. After events with the Shi'ar and the X-Men, Jean sacrificed herself in order to save the universe from the Dark Phoenix that she had become, and she was completely atomized. It was incredibly sad, and the story itself was really good. But then, years later in Fantastic Four number 286, it was revealed that Jean Grey had somehow been alive this entire time, and the being that actually went through the Phoenix and Dark Phoenix sagas was actually just the Phoenix Force itself that took on Jean's form. Jean herself was instead placed in a cocoon in Jamaica Bay, which is where she was reborn into the Phoenix originally. This brought the fan favorite character back to life, sure, but devalued the whole Phoenix and Dark Phoenix sagas for fans and made people hate Jim Shooter, Marvel's editor-in-chief. And finally, in at number 1, it's Hal Jordan. There is a theme in comic books of characters who are possessed or mind-controlled to make them switch up their morals and ways of thinking to become villains. Hal Jordan's turn to the dark side is probably one of the most famous. Hal Jordan was possibly the greatest Green Lantern, at least according to the comics, but in the 90s, that changed. After the death of Superman and the subsequent reign of the Supermen, Coast City, Hal Jordan's home, was destroyed. This completely changed the Lantern, and he even tried using his power ring to try and revive the city and all its inhabitants, which was against the Green Lantern's rules. When the Guardians of the Universe tried to stop him, he completely lost his mind. He went off the handle, ending the lives of every single Green Lantern and snapping Sinestro's neck. Hal named himself Parallax, and he became a threat to the whole DC universe for like a decade before sacrificing himself. Hal eventually came back in 2004's Green Lantern Rebirth, with Parallax being retconned as the primal entity of fear that was trapped in the central power battery and eventually corrupted Hal. But the damage was done, and he could never really live it down. Coming in at number 10 is Johnny Bates. Some of you may be aware of Marvel Man. Some of you may not. Essentially, he is an old superhero who was roughly the British equivalent of Captain Marvel, aka Shazam from the DC Universe. Michael Morin had the ability to transform into a superpowered hero by saying the word Marvel Man. For a while, some legal issues made it Miracle Man, but you get the point. Like Billy Batson, Moran also had a sidekick, Johnny Bates, who by saying his magic word transformed into Kid Marvel Man. These two and their whole super family, including Marvel Woman, were sidelined for almost 20 years after a big long comic book run, with the heroes resurfacing in 1982 under Alan Moore. As part of that revival, Marvel Man and Kid Marvel Man were part of a secret government program and were attacked with a nuke. Now, they both survived, but Marvel Man now had no memory of his superhero alter ego. Kid Marvel Man, on the other hand, believed he was the only survivor and decided never to return to his child form ever again, growing into a superpowered adult. This allowed him to grow his powers enormously, but his disillusionment at being alone in the world and the power he now had turned him into a complete psychopath. Kid Marvel Man went on a rampage, attacking and destroying almost the whole of London, England, and wiping out most of the population, and he never got to redeem himself because he was defeated and completely wiped out by his former mentor for being too dangerous to be kept alive. Number 9. Omn Man. Now, this isn't incredibly unbelievable anymore, as it is a huge plot point in the story of Invincible. But I watched the show before I read the comics, and when Omn Man turned around and brutally decimated the whole of the Guardians of the Globe, I honestly sat there with my mouth open just staring at my TV. It's possibly one of the biggest reasons that I quickly ran and read the entire series. You see, Omn Man is at first presented as the closest thing to Superman in the Invincible universe. He's set up as the world's strongest hero, hailing from an empire of human-like aliens called Viltrumites who seek to be peacekeepers throughout the universe. And then, all of a sudden, the Viltrumites are revealed to actually be the biggest threat to the universe, being brutal and desperate conquerors, with Omn Man sent to Earth to judge the planet's viability as the new Viltrumite breeding ground, and then take it over for the entire empire. Unlike other Superman but bad characters, one of the central conflicts behind this story is the father-son relationship between Omn Man and his son Mark, or Invincible. And the whole thing was just an awesome twist that you don't expect until it happens, and then it hooks you in so you want to see what happens next. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, make sure you go ahead and drop a like, and make sure to check out part 1 where we covered 10 more heroes who fell to the dark side. Thanks. In at number 8 though is Injustice Superman. Some of the best Superman stories have to deal with the Man of Steel, or should I say an alternate version of him, going to the dark side or just being straight up evil. Ultraman, Superboy Prime, Superman Red Sun, all fantastic takes on the character, but, and this is an arguable point, the darkest and most shocking of these is Injustice. Sure, Injustice is based off the Mortal Kombat-like video game, but its story, built upon its own line of comics, isn't just dark from the get-go, but it's actually pretty great. Thanks to the Joker, Superman is tricked into taking the life of Lois Lane, destroying Metropolis, and taking out his own son. He then decides to plunge his hand straight through the Joker's chest, pretty understandably, just cementing the fact that he has gone bad forever. But if that weren't enough, it's the way he dispatches the other heroes who used to be his friends that will really get you. Burning Martian Manhunter and using his heat vision on Shazam's eyeballs are two of the worst ones for me. Number 7, Thor. After the passing of Odin at the hands of Surtur during Dan Jurgens' 1998 to 2004 run on Thor, Thor ends up becoming king of Asgard, and well, Thor ends up being a pretty bad king. He is harsh, he lacks patience, and he makes some really questionable choices with the Odin Force power that he now wields. Choices like going off fighting frost giants, getting together with Amora the Enchantress of all people, and, in a really odd move, Thor decides that Asgard should invade Earth. Thor uses the resources at Asgard's command to try and forcibly solve all of Midgard's problems. Instead of trying to lead humans to be better, he just solves our problems for us, and while there is a lot of good done by this, sure, a lot of people are resistant to it. A coalition of different countries stage an attack against Asgard, destroying both it and New York City, pushing Thor even further into becoming a sort of dictator. He failed the Koran Kata, which is the test of character put in place by the Council of Godheads, and if that weren't enough, Thor eventually becomes unworthy of Mjolnir when he takes the life of Jake Olsen. He gains religious followers, makes enemies of his friends, and fights and imprisons other Avengers. But he does indeed become the ruler of Earth over the next 200 years, only to reverse it all when he realized how he was still a failure in the eyes of his son. Number 6, Black Mary. Black Mary has long been considered one of DC Comics' most wholesome characters, being one of the best members of the DC Shazam family. But after losing her powers in the trials of Shazam, Mary later encountered Black Adam. Now at this point in time, Black Adam was dealing with his wife's passing, and after realizing Mary was now powerless, Black Adam decided to imbue her with a portion of his power, transforming her into a dark, angry version of her former self. Going by the name Black Mary, Mary eventually became addicted to dark magic and ended up entangling in the schemes of Darkseid and his evil minion Desaad. Black Adam took Shazam's best family member and the most wholesome person around and corrupted her. I ain't even mad at her for letting it happen. Black Adam is a jerk. Number 5, Scarlet Witch. After Wanda Maximoff had gained a powerful new chaos magic from Chthon, she was a little bit more unstable than usual, and after the children she had lost and forgotten about, an unintentional remark by a fellow Avenger, the Wasp, mentioning her kids drove her over the edge. again. And her chaos magic was unleashed and she went bananas on the Avengers, really giving it to them. This directly led to the de-lifing of the now Wanda-crazed Vision by She-Hulk, an illusion of a Kree invasion, a fake team of Avengers to protect Wanda, and not to mention the end of the line for both Hawkeye and Ant-Man. This caused the Avengers and X-Men to come together to think of ways to deal with her. Some, including Xavier, even suggested they put her somewhere she can do no harm. Somewhere like the afterlife, for example. As you can imagine, it didn't sit very well with Wanda when her brother Quicksilver told her about this and urged her to take action against it. Wanda then used her reality warping chaos magic powers to rewrite the entire of reality to the House of M. Number 4. Icarus. This one came as a bit of a surprise for me personally. I read the Eternals comics as a kid and Icarus was the greatest of them. He was cool, if not like a little basic, but he wasn't a traitor, so it was almost a pleasant surprise to see the MCU go a totally different route of making him betray his fellow Eternals. I think it made the story just way more interesting. Basically, Icarus learned of his true purpose, to protect the human race to prepare for the birth of the Celestial growing inside of the Earth. His fellow Eternals, including their leader Ajax, however, had grown attached to humanity, and so Icarus made the decision to betray them, causing Ajax passing and trying to bring the birth of Tiamat the Celestial. It was an interesting change that some people may have liked and others may have hated, but it happened all the same, and in my opinion, it was pretty cool. Number 3. Angel. Warren Worthington III was one of the original 5 X-Men, going by the superhero name Angel because of his huge and amazing wings that allowed him to fly. But when he moved to the X-Force team, things went a little downhill. Thanks to a crossover event called the Mutant Massacre, Warren's wings were mutilated by the mutant Harpoon. Each wing was impaled, causing them to become infected and eventually even amputated. Warren was absolutely devastated by this, and at his weakest moment, the incredibly powerful villain Apocalypse showed up to save the day, quote unquote. Apocalypse offered to restore Warren's wings on the condition that Angel would serve as his horseman death. Warren, being completely lost, agreed, and he became Archangel and the lead horseman. Knowing all their tactics and all their weaknesses, Archangel beat all of the X-Men in battle way too easily. Eventually, Iceman helped him to recover his heroic side again, but this change endured, and the Archangel persona has been a huge part of Warren's character ever since, with him battling with his darker persona and eventually learning how to control and harness it. Number 2. Bishop. Bishop's portrayal of the X-Men during 2007's Messiah Complex revealed how far the time-displaced mutant is willing to go to change the future for the better. Basically, Bishop comes from a dark future where mutants and humanity had eventually gone to war, and he eventually ended up trapped in the present. He became an X-Men, and he served on a number of teams off and on over the years, even being Professor X's personal bodyguard, and was just incredibly popular. After decimation depowered almost all mutants on Earth, the birth of Hope Summers signaled hope for the mutants, as she was the first mutant born since the decimation, and she was an incredibly powerful one too. But Bishop's past came back to haunt him, convincing him that Hope was the cause of the dark future that he came from. He betrayed the X-Men and planned to take out Hope before she could grow up and change the world forever. He set off nano sentinels with the One Sentinel Squad, taking down the human pilots and pitting the Sentinels against the X-Men. He then ambushed Forge in the chaos, laying a trap to capture Cable, who was protecting Hope, and end Hope's life. By the end of the event, Bishop had to flee the X-Men after firing on Hope, and instead accidentally striking and nearly taking down Charles Xavier himself. And finally, in at number 1, it's Daredevil. The ninja clan known as the Hand has had many run-ins with different heroes over the years, but none of those heroes have had as much interaction with the shadowy group as Daredevil. His mentor, Stick, and his sometimes girlfriend, Elektra, have history with the clan as well, and he's never been particularly fond of them, because why would he be? But when he seemed to secure control over the clan itself, he decided to put their skills to good use. He moved them to Hell's Kitchen and set up a headquarters and prison known as Shadowland. He changed the Hand into what he thought was a force for good, but as his time with the Hand went on, he seemed to be the one who was changing for the worse, becoming more aggressive and drastic with his methods of crime fighting. He started to butt heads with other heroes and even became responsible for the passing of his adversary, Bullseye. Now it turns out that this brutal new Daredevil was actually being possessed by an ancient demon called the Beast, who is the source of the Hand's mystical powers. Daredevil was secretly manipulated by the Snake Root, which is a small faction of the Hand that worshipped the Beast. They manipulated Daredevil into undergoing the ritual of the Black Flower. So when Daredevil took Bullseye's life, it actually completed the ritual and the Beast possessed him fully and corrupted the people of Hell's Kitchen until Iron Fist exorcised the demon from Matt Murdock.
Number 10. Chasm. Chasm is Ben Reilly, who became a villain once more following the events of Spider-Man Beyond. During Beyond, Ben Reilly was given the role of Spider-Man after being hired by the Beyond Corporation, which had acquired the Spider-Man trademark. Despite this, both Peter and Ben showed up to fight the UFOs as Spider-Man, with Peter ending up comatose while Ben was safe thanks to the new Spider-Man suit he'd received from Beyond. Operating as Spider-Man while Peter was unable to, Ben discovered the truth of the Beyond Corporation and of the fact that he'd been having his mind wiped by them regularly. Apparently something he signed up for himself. Peter returned to defeat Beyond and help Ben, but instead the two ended up fighting each other, with Ben seemingly perishing. However, it was later revealed that Ben is still alive, and due to his memories still being incomplete, became a villain going by the name Chasm. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to show us you love us by clicking that like button. I wish there was a love button for you to click, but there's not. It's just all we got is like.
Number 9. Bucky Barnes. In the comics, just like his Marvel Cinematic Universe counterpart, Bucky Barnes faced a transformation that would redefine his character. Initially believed to have perished on a mission alongside Captain America, crashing while on an experimental rocket, he was, in fact, captured and subjected to intense brainwashing by the USSR. When Bucky resurfaced as the Winter Soldier, he was one of the deadliest adversaries in the Marvel Universe, capable of going toe-to-toe with his former ally, Captain America. His time as a ruthless brainwashed assassin was colored by dark deeds and chilling actions that would haunt him for a very long time after he returned to the side of the heroes. Now, while Bucky has rejoined the ranks of heroes, the shadow of his time as the Winter Soldier continues to cast a long, haunting presence over his character to this day.
Number 8. Malice. How best to describe Malice? Well, she's a bit complicated. She is in essence the darker side of Susan Storm, but there's also like a ton of other Malices in the comics, and one of them is like their own entity even, that also can possess people. It's a whole bunch of things really, and there's also Penance, which sounds like Malice but isn't. After all, this is comics, so obviously there's a lot of names here that, can't be exclusive. However, for this list, the Malice that we're talking about is the evil side of Susan Storm, who was made manifest initially by the Psycho Man's hate monger. This personality within Susan would reappear a few times in the comics before eventually being permanently wiped from Sue's psyche by Psylord. At least, so we think. I don't think that Malice has come back since then, but I wouldn't be surprised, that's all I'm saying. Sue has to deal with a lot of crazy shit.
Number 7. Ultimate Black Widow. A change in the Ultimate Universe that actually made sense in my head for some reason was the relationship between Tony Stark and Black Widow. Shortly after Iron Man joined the S.H.I.E.L.D.-sponsored Ultimates team, he and Natalia Romanova struck up their relationship, and it went so far the two eventually got engaged, with Tony even giving Black Widow her own nanite-controlled suit of armor, which did look really cool by the way. But the happy couple didn't last too long, as it turned out that Natalia was actually a traitor working for the Liberators. After she turned on Tony, she managed to end the life of his longtime butler and close friend, Jarvis. Kind of an unredeemable act there. So it didn't feel so bad when Tony used the nanites inside Natasha's body, the ones used to control that fancy new armor, to paralyze her and steal information from her brain about the Liberators and her betrayal. And then, Tony knocks her unconscious with a wine bottle, giving her brain damage. There was also this whole raunchy video that got leaked of the two, which just felt kind of random, but hey, it happens. But then, even worse than all of that, she took the life of Hawkeye's entire family, and to top it off, framed Captain America for it. Damn.
Number 6. Troya. Donna Troy is a popular character known for her association with the Teen Titans and as a superhero. In the past, she was also known as Wonder Woman's younger sister, but she is now an adult in the comics. While she has appeared in many stories, I want to focus on a lesser known aspect of her character. In an alternate future, a version of Donna Troy becomes Wonder Woman's greatest enemy, known as Troya, which is also a name that the main continuity version of Donna has been known as, and I know that, but this is its own thing, so just go with me here. This version of Troya has been a villain for over 1,000 years in her timeline. In her reality, many of the fellow Titans have died, and Donna realizes that she was created solely to be a weapon. She embraces this as her destiny and kills many villains and heroes as a result, including Diana, who played a role in the lie that Donna believed about herself, that she was ever anything more than a weapon, a tool.
Number 5. Hank Pym. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Hank Pym is portrayed as a hero who previously donned the Ant-Man suit. But that Hank is a pretty different version of the character in the comics, who has a much darker and controversial history. In the comic book universe, Hank and his partner Janet were not only heroes in a relationship, but founding members of the Avengers. Their life together was not as seemingly well structured as it was in the MCU, especially when Hank experienced a mental breakdown after being suspended from the team. He accidentally dropped and smashed some vials containing various unknown gases. The released gases gave Pym a radical temporary personality change in him that was basically a severe case of schizophrenia. He took the new identity of Yellow Jacket, kidnapped Van Dyne, and proposed marriage to her as Pym had long wanted to do. Now, realizing that Yellow Jacket was really Pym, Van Dyne decided to play along, fearing that she would worsen his psychological condition if she did otherwise. Their relationship was pretty bad, with Pym feeling like a useless scientist and being jealous of his wife's success as a fashion designer. It all took a disturbing turn though when Hank physically struck Janet, highlighting the trouble's depths to which he had sunk. While Hank eventually returned to heroism, sort of, his problematic behavior struck a big shadow over the character going forward.
Number 4. Older Iron Man. Although I would say the later times that this happened, it wasn't as much of a surprise. The first time most definitely was. Iron Man is well known for being one of the most iconic members of the Avengers superhero team. So, how was he corrupted? Well, in an event that is often regarded by fans as being one of the weirdest for character designs and honestly also kind of for story, Iron Man was revealed to have been a sleeper agent of Immortus, an alternate timeline version of Kang the Conqueror, for many years. As such, he started turning on his allies and friends who turned to Tony's past self in the hopes of defeating him, bringing a younger version of him to the present, a version of Tony who had not yet been corrupted by Immortus. This version would lose in a fight against his older, now evil self, but ultimately would take older Iron Man's place after older Iron Man chose to sacrifice himself, having a moment of redemption before he ultimately passed. And then they got melded together, and now we have Tony today, and it's a weird thing.
Number 3. Terra of the Teen Titans. The Judas Contract story is definitely the most popular and definitive new Teen Titans story to date, and it includes a gutting betrayal that I would be remiss to not talk about. In New Teen Titans number 26, we are introduced to Terra Markov, a young girl who joined the team. Now, it turns out that Terra had actually infiltrated the team following orders from none other than their nemesis, Deathstroke the Terminator. Terra, being brainwashed, dismantled the team from the inside out, and it completely wrecked the Titans. She and Deathstroke were eventually foiled by intervention from Deathstroke's son, Jericho, and Dick Grayson in his first outing as Nightwing, with Terra passing away at the story's conclusion, having brought down a building around herself in a blind rampage. The Titans still honor her to this day with a statue and with the name being passed on to other heroes, but goodness gracious was this story fantastic and the betrayal deep and rooted.
Number 2. Omega Spawn. I still can't believe that this happened, although I guess it only happened in an alternate reality, so that's fine. And I guess I can kinda see Spawn being an evil guy, but still, before I knew whether or not this was canon or alternate timeline magic, I was shook by the revelation that Spawn became Omega Spawn. I thought Omega Spawn initially was just a straight up alternate or like a different character altogether, but when I looked into it, I realized that this version of Spawn was simply an Al Simmons who had fulfilled one of his destinies, with Satan preparing Al to take his place as ruler of Hell, which is precisely what happens here. Omega Spawn is what would happen if Spawn took on the crown from the devil and allowed it to corrupt him, becoming the ruler of Hell and Hell's champion as opposed to Heaven's, which is another path that was actually offered to him in the main continuity, but one that he ultimately refused. In fact, at this point, Spawn actually hates both Heaven and Hell equally. Although Omega Spawn is also confusing to me because I feel like there's also like another Omega Spawn and Omega Spawn.
And finally, in at number 1 today, it's Hulk the End. Okay, so for the most part, these lists so far have dealt with the downfall of a hero to become a villain. While the Hulk has certainly had that in the form of Maestro and some other times, the Hulk also has a story called Hulk the End. Now, the End series chronicles the last days of various different characters in the Marvel Universe. For a lot of Doomsday type stories, it often ends in the Earth being destroyed in a nuclear war. But what remains after that? Basically, it's the Hulk. As the only human left on planet Earth, Bruce Banner wanders the waste in an eternal struggle with himself, as in an eternal struggle with the Hulk. Basically, Bruce has seen the passing of all those that he loved, all those that he cared about. There's nothing left for him in this world, and he would prefer to just pass away. But no matter what he does, the Hulk does not let him. For the Hulk persona, he thinks Banner's will to pass away is a puny human thought, and he wants to be the strongest there is and to be separated from Banner and just left alone. The two of them have a huge internal falling out, and then Bruce has a heart attack that actually ends his life, or at least his half of life, because while the Hulk himself goes on to survive, he now realizes just how alone he actually is. How's that for a downfall?